The auctioneer's voice cut through the dusty afternoon air like a knife, and Gemma Vance felt her stomach drop as her uncle pushed her forward onto the makeshift platform in front of the ship captain, his calloused hand gripping her arm so tightly she knew there would be bruises come morning. "She's young, she's strong, and she'll work hard for her keep," Uncle Bernard announced to the small crowd gathered at the edge of Pecos, Texas, where the traveling merchant vessel had stopped to take on passengers heading east. "All I'm asking is passage for myself to New Orleans, and you can have her to work off the debt however you see fit once we arrive." The year was 1878, and Gemma had known her uncle was desperate, but she had never imagined he would stoop to this. Her parents had died 6 months prior from scarlet fever, leaving her in Bernard's care, and he had made it abundantly clear from the start that she was nothing but a burden. Still, selling her like livestock to pay for his own escape from the hardscrabble life of West Texas was beyond anything she had prepared herself for. Captain Morris, a heavy-set man with tobacco-stained teeth and cold eyes, circled her slowly, appraising her as though she were a horse he was considering purchasing. "She looks a bit scrawny. What makes you think she's worth a $50 passage? She can cook, clean, sew, and she's got her mother's good looks," Bernard said quickly, the desperation creeping into his voice. "Once you get her east, you can sell her contract to one of them fancy houses or factories. She'll fetch triple what you're paying." Gemma's cheeks burned with humiliation and rage, but she kept her eyes fixed on the distant horizon, refusing to give either man the satisfaction of seeing her cry. The small crowd that had gathered consisted mostly of curious onlookers and a few rough-looking men who had emerged from the saloon across the dirt road. She could feel their eyes on her, assessing, judging, and her skin crawled. "I'll give you $30 for passage and take the girl," Captain Morris said finally, pulling a wad of bills from his vest pocket. "30? That's highway robbery. She's worth at least 50. 30 or nothing. Take it or leave it." Bernard's jaw clenched, and Gemma could see him calculating, weighing his options. She knew he would take it. He had already made up his mind to abandon her, and $30 was better than nothing. $100. The voice came from behind them, deep and steady, and every head turned to see who had spoken. A tall man stepped forward from the small crowd, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each measured step. He wore dark trousers, a worn leather vest over a blue shirt, and a hat that shadowed his face from the harsh afternoon sun. As he drew closer, Gemma could see he was younger than she had initially thought, probably in his mid-20s with dark hair and eyes the color of whiskey. "I said $100, the stranger repeated, his gaze fixed on Bernard. "Cash, right now, and the girl stays here in Pecos." Captain Morris sputtered. "Now hold on just a minute. We were in the middle of a transaction here." "No, you were in the middle of taking advantage of a desperate man and an innocent girl," the stranger said, his voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. "I'm offering a fair price, more than fair, for her uncle to sign over any claim he has to her and leave her be." Bernard's eyes widened with greedy interest. $100? You got that kind of money on you?" The stranger reached into his vest and pulled out a leather wallet, thick with bills. He counted out $100 with practiced ease, holding the money up for Bernard to see. "Right here. But I want it in writing that you're releasing all claims to your niece, that you're not her guardian, and that you'll leave Texas and never contact her again." "That's a lot of conditions," Bernard said, but his eyes never left the money. "That's the offer. Take it or walk away. But if you walk away, I'm going to make sure Captain Morris here knows exactly what kind of man he's dealing with, and I doubt he'll want to do business with someone who'd sell his own blood." The crowd had grown larger now, drawn by the spectacle, and Gemma felt her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She had no idea who this stranger was or why he was intervening, but anything was better than being shipped east like cargo to an unknown fate. Bernard's face worked through several emotions before finally settling on resignation mixed with satisfaction. "Fine. Get me something to write on." One of the onlookers produced a piece of paper and a pencil, and the stranger dictated the terms while Bernard scrawled them out in his barely legible handwriting. When it was done, the stranger examined the paper carefully, then handed over the $100. Bernard snatched the bills, counted them twice, then turned to Gemma with something that might have been guilt flickering across his face. "You're on your own now, girl. Make something of yourself." Then he turned and walked toward the ship without another word, his shoulders already lighter, his step quicker. Gemma watched him go, feeling a confusing mixture of relief and abandonment wash over her. She had no family now, no home, and no idea what this stranger wanted with her. The crowd began to disperse, the show over, and Captain Morris gave the stranger a hard look before heading back to his vessel. "You made a foolish purchase, Cowboy. That girl's going to be nothing but trouble and expense." "I'll take my chances," the stranger replied evenly. When they were finally alone, or as alone as one could be on the main street of a small Texas town, the stranger turned to Gemma and removed his hat, revealing a strong-featured face with sun-weathered skin and surprisingly gentle eyes. "Name's Russell Young," he said, extending his hand. "I've got a ranch about 5 miles west of here. I'm sorry about what just happened, but I couldn't stand by and watch that." Gemma stared at his hand for a long moment before carefully shaking it. "Gemma Vance, and I appreciate what you did, Mr. Young, but I'm confused. What exactly do you expect from me now? You paid $100 for me, which means you must want something in return." Russell shook his head. "I didn't buy you, Miss Vance. I bought your freedom from a man who had no right to sell it. As far as I'm concerned, you're free to do whatever you want. If you want to head east on the next ship, that's your choice. If you want to stay in Pecos, I can help you find respectable work. If you need a place to stay while you figure things out, I've got a spare room at the ranch, and my sister Emma lives with me, so it would all be proper." Gemma felt tears prick at her eyes for the first time since this nightmare had begun. "Why would you do that? You don't know me." "Because it was the right thing to do," Russell said simply. "And because I know what it's like to lose your parents and feel like the world doesn't care whether you live or die. My sister and I lost our folks 5 years ago, and if it hadn't been for the kindness of a few good people, we wouldn't have made it." She studied his face, looking for any sign of deception or ulterior motive, but all she saw was honest concern. Still, a lifetime of her uncle's lessons about trusting no one made her cautious. "I don't have any money to pay you back. I'm not asking you to, but if it would make you feel better, you could help Emma with the household work at the ranch. She's been managing everything on her own while I handle the cattle and the land, and I know she'd appreciate another woman's company. We'd pay you fair wages, and you'd have a room of your own. If after a few weeks you decide you want to move on, we'll help you do that too." It was the most generous offer Gemma had ever received, and suspicion warred with desperate hope in her chest. She had nowhere else to go, no other options, and despite her wariness, something about Russell Young seemed trustworthy. "All right," she said finally. "I'll come to the ranch and help your sister, but I want to be clear that I'm working for wages, not out of obligation because of what you paid my uncle." "Understood," Russell said, and his face broke into the first real smile she had seen from him. It transformed his features, making him seem younger and more approachable. "I've got my horse tied up at the livery. We can ride double back to the ranch, and Emma will get you settled in." As they walked through the dusty streets of Pecos toward the livery stable, Gemma tried to process everything that had happened in the last hour. She had gone from being sold like property to being offered a fresh start by a complete stranger. Part of her still expected Russell to reveal his true intentions, to demand something in return for his generosity, but another part of her, the part that was exhausted from months of grief and mistreatment, wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, there were still good people in the world. Russell's horse was a sturdy roan gelding named Copper, and he helped Gemma mount before swinging up behind her. She stiffened at the proximity, but Russell kept a respectful distance, his arms on either side of her as he held the reins, never touching her more than necessary. The ride to the ranch took about 40 minutes, and as they traveled west across the rolling Texas landscape, Russell pointed out various landmarks and told her about the area. "The ranch has been in my family for 15 years. My father built it up from nothing, and when he and my mother passed, Emma and I inherited it. We've got about 300 head of cattle, a dozen horses, and enough land to expand if we're careful. It's hard work, but it's honest work. How old is your sister? Gemma asked, feeling more comfortable now that they were away from town and the memories of her humiliation. Emma's 22, just a year younger than me. She's got strong opinions and doesn't hesitate to share them, but she's got a good heart. I think you two will get along well. And it's really just the two of you running the whole ranch? We've got two ranch hands who help with the cattle, Miguel and his son Carlos. They live in a small house on the north end of the property. Good men, both of them. Miguel worked for my father and stayed on after he died. Don't know what we would have done without him. As the sun began to sink lower in the sky, painting everything in shades of gold and amber, the ranch came into view. It was a modest but well-maintained property with a large two-story house, a barn, several corrals, and various outbuildings. Cattle grazed in the distance, and Gemma could see vegetable gardens near the house, carefully tended and flourishing despite the Texas heat. A young woman emerged from the house as they rode up, wiping her hands on her apron. She had the same dark hair as Russell, though hers was longer and pulled back in a practical braid, and similar strong features that spoke of their relation. "Russell, you're later than I expected," she called out, then stopped short when she noticed Gemma. "Oh, you brought someone." Russell dismounted and helped Gemma down before turning to his sister. "Emma, this is Gemma Vance. She's going to be staying with us for a while and helping out around the house. Gemma, this is my sister Emma." Emma's eyes narrowed slightly as she looked between her brother and Gemma, clearly sensing there was more to the story. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Vance. Russell, can I speak with you inside for a moment?" "Of course. Gemma, why don't you wait here? We'll be right back." The siblings disappeared into the house, and Gemma stood awkwardly in the yard, petting Copper's soft nose while she waited. She could hear the murmur of voices from inside, Emma's rising in pitch once or twice, but couldn't make out the actual words. After about 10 minutes, they both emerged, Emma's expression softer than before. "I apologize for that," Emma said, approaching Gemma with her hand extended. "Russell explained what happened in town. That was a terrible thing your uncle tried to do, and you must have been terrified. You're welcome to stay here as long as you need, and I truly would appreciate the help. This place is more than one person can manage." Gemma shook her hand gratefully. "Thank you, Miss Young. I promise I'll work hard and earn my keep. Please, call me Emma, and you'll do no such thing. You're not a servant here. You're a guest who happens to be helping out. Now let's get you inside and show you your room. You must be exhausted." The interior of the house was clean and comfortable, furnished with well-made but simple pieces that spoke of function over luxury. Emma led Gemma upstairs to a small bedroom with a window overlooking the western pastures. It had a bed with a real mattress, a dresser, a washstand, and even a small mirror on the wall. "I know it's not much, but it's yours," Emma said. "There's a clean nightgown in the top drawer, and I'll heat some water so you can wash up before supper. We eat in about an hour, if that suits you." "This is wonderful," Gemma said honestly, running her hand over the soft quilt on the bed. "I haven't had a room of my own in months. My uncle made me sleep in the kitchen." Emma's face darkened. "Your uncle sounds like a thoroughly unpleasant man. Well, he's gone now, and you're safe here. Russell and I may work you hard because there's always plenty to do on a ranch, but we'll never treat you as less than family." After Emma left, Gemma sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed herself to cry. She cried for her parents, for the loss of the only life she had known, for the humiliation of being sold in the street like livestock, and for the overwhelming relief of having escaped a fate that would have surely broken her. When the tears finally stopped, she washed her face in the basin of cool water Emma had left and changed into the clean nightgown, even though it was still early. Her own dress was dusty and stained from the day's events, and she folded it carefully, planning to wash it tomorrow. Supper was a quiet affair, just the three of them around a large wooden table in the kitchen. Emma had prepared beef stew with fresh bread, and Gemma ate ravenously, realizing she had not eaten since early that morning. Russell and Emma kept up a steady conversation about ranch business, occasionally including Gemma by explaining something or asking her opinion, and gradually she began to relax. So what did you do before your parents passed? Emma asked gently. My father was a shopkeeper in Dallas, Gemma said. We had a general store, and I helped my mother with the household and sometimes minded the shop when my father needed an extra hand. After they died, the shop had debts we didn't know about, and everything was sold to pay them off. That's when I went to live with Uncle Bernard, my mother's brother. He had a small farm outside Pecos, but he wasn't much of a farmer, and things just kept getting worse. That must have been incredibly difficult, Russell said, his voice full of sympathy. Losing everything all at once like that. It was, but I'm learning that life doesn't give you much choice except to keep moving forward. That's what my mother always said anyway. Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman, Emma said. I think she'd be proud of how you handled yourself today. It took courage to get through that. Gemma felt her throat tighten with emotion. I didn't feel very courageous. I felt terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Russell said quietly. It's doing what needs to be done despite the fear. You could have fallen apart, but you didn't. That's courage. After supper, Gemma insisted on helping with the dishes, despite Emma's protests, and the three of them worked together to clean up the kitchen. When everything was put away, Emma showed Gemma the rest of the house, including the bathing room, the parlor, and Russell's study, where he kept the ranch accounts. We usually rise before dawn around here, Emma explained as they headed back upstairs. The animals need tending early, and it's best to get the hard work done before the heat of the day sets in. But tomorrow, why don't you sleep in and rest? You can start helping the day after, once you've had a chance to recover from everything. I'd rather keep busy, Gemma admitted. It helps keep my mind from dwelling on things I can't change. Emma studied her for a moment, then nodded. I understand that feeling. All right, then tomorrow I'll show you the routine, and we'll work out a schedule that makes sense for both of us. That night, Gemma lay in the comfortable bed in her small room and stared at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling around her. She could hear cattle lowing in the distance, the wind rustling through the trees near the house, and the occasional creak of floorboards as Russell or Emma moved around downstairs. It was peaceful in a way she had not experienced in a long time, and despite everything that had happened, she felt a small spark of hope beginning to kindle in her chest. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity and adjustment. Emma taught Gemma the rhythms of ranch life, feeding the chickens and collecting eggs, tending the vegetable garden, preparing meals for the household, washing clothes, making butter and cheese, preserving food for winter, and countless other tasks that kept them busy from sunrise to sunset. Gemma threw herself into the work with determination, grateful for the distraction and eager to prove her worth. Russell was often gone during the day, riding out with Miguel and Carlos to check on the cattle, repair fences, or handle the countless tasks that came with managing 300 head of livestock and several thousand acres of land. But in the evenings, he would return dusty and tired, and Gemma found herself looking forward to his arrival more than she wanted to admit. He was different from any man she had ever known. He was quiet and thoughtful, never raising his voice or making demands, but when he spoke, people listened because his words carried weight. He treated Emma with respect and affection, and he extended that same courtesy to Gemma, always asking her opinion on matters and genuinely listening to her responses. He had a dry sense of humor that occasionally caught her off guard, making her laugh when she least expected it, and she noticed that his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. One evening, about a month after her arrival, Gemma was sitting on the porch after supper, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. Russell came out and settled into the chair beside her, a cup of coffee in his hands. "Beautiful evening," he said companionably. "It is. I never get tired of watching the sunset out here. It's different every night." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of quiet that had become easy between them over the past weeks. Finally, Russell spoke again, his voice casual, but with an underlying seriousness. Emma tells me you're thinking about staying on permanently instead of just temporarily. Is that true? Gemma felt her cheeks warm. She had mentioned to Emma a few days ago that she was happy at the ranch and had no desire to leave, at least not anytime soon. I am, if that's all right. I know I said I might move on after a few weeks, but I like it here. Emma and I work well together, and I feel safe for the first time since my parents died. You don't need to justify it to me, Russell said gently. I'm glad you want to stay. You've become part of this place, and I think we'd all miss you if you left. Even you? The question slipped out before Gemma could stop it, and she immediately wanted to take it back. Russell turned to look at her, his expression unreadable in the fading light. Especially me. Her heart stuttered in her chest, and she did not know what to say. There was something in his eyes, something that made her feel warm and nervous and excited all at once. She had been trying very hard not to think about Russell Young in any capacity beyond employer and friend, but moments like this made that nearly impossible. I should probably get inside and help Emma with tomorrow's preparations, she said, standing abruptly. Russell stood as well, his hand briefly touching her elbow. Gemma, wait. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I just wanted you to know that you're welcome here, not just as a worker, but as part of our family. Both Emma and I consider you a friend. I know, she said softly, and I feel the same way. Thank you, Russell, for everything. For saving me, for giving me a home, for treating me with kindness. I don't think I'll ever be able to repay you properly. You don't owe me anything, he said firmly. Your happiness and safety are more than enough payment. As autumn settled over the Texas plains, bringing slightly cooler temperatures and the promise of winter, Gemma found herself settling into a life she had never imagined possible. She and Emma had become close friends, spending their days working side by side and their evenings sharing stories and dreams. Miguel and Carlos were frequent visitors to the main house, often joining them for meals and teaching Gemma about cattle and horses and the practical skills needed for ranch life. But it was Russell who occupied more and more of her thoughts. She found herself watching for him during the day, listening for the sound of his horse returning in the evening, and treasuring the moments when they could sit together and talk about everything and nothing. She noticed small things about him, the way he always removed his hat when entering the house, the gentleness with which he handled animals, the patience he showed when teaching her to ride, the loyalty he inspired in Miguel and Carlos, the love he had for his sister. She also noticed the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not paying attention. There was warmth in those glances and something deeper that made her pulse quicken. But neither of them spoke of it, both seemingly content to let whatever was growing between them develop naturally, without pressure or expectations. One crisp November morning, Emma announced at breakfast that she would be traveling to San Antonio to visit a childhood friend who was getting married. I'll be gone for about 10 days, maybe 2 weeks. Gemma, I hate to leave you with all the work, but I promised Martha I'd be there, and I can't break that promise. Of course you should go, Gemma said immediately. Don't worry about anything here. I can manage the household, and if I need help, I'm sure Russell and Miguel can assist. Emma looked relieved. You're wonderful. I knew I could count on you. Russell, you'll behave yourself and not work Gemma to death while I'm gone. I'll do my best, Russell said with a slight smile, though you know how demanding I can be. Emma threw a biscuit at him, which he caught easily, and they all laughed. But after Emma left the next morning on the stage to San Antonio, the house felt different, quieter, and Gemma was acutely aware that she and Russell would be alone together except for the presence of Miguel and Carlos during working hours. The first few days passed uneventfully. Gemma maintained the household routine, and Russell kept to his usual schedule of ranch work. But on the fourth evening, a sudden storm blew in from the west, bringing heavy rain and strong winds. Russell returned to the house earlier than usual, soaked through and shivering. There's a section of fence down in the north pasture, he reported as Gemma handed him a towel. Miguel and Carlos are moving the cattle to higher ground in case the creek floods. I need to go back out and help them finish, but I wanted to check on you first and make sure the house is secure. I'm fine, the house is fine, but Russell, you're freezing. At least change into dry clothes and have some hot coffee before you go back out. He nodded, too cold to argue, and disappeared upstairs. Gemma quickly prepared coffee and heated up leftover stew, and by the time Russell came back down in dry clothes, she had a full meal ready for him. You're a lifesaver, he said gratefully, wrapping his hands around the hot cup of coffee. This storm came out of nowhere. We weren't expecting it for another day or two. Is it dangerous? Should I be worried? The biggest concern is flooding if the rain keeps up. The creek can overflow its banks pretty quickly, and we've got cattle in the low pastures that need to be moved to safety. But the house is on high ground, so you'll be fine here. He ate quickly, and Gemma packed more food for him to take to Miguel and Carlos. As he was preparing to leave, she caught his arm. Please be careful. Don't take any unnecessary risks. Russell looked down at her hand on his arm, then up to her face, his expression softening. I'll be careful, I promise. He left, and Gemma spent the next several hours trying to keep herself busy while anxiety gnawed at her. The storm intensified, rain lashing against the windows and wind howling around the corners of the house. She kept a fire burning in the hearth and periodically checked to make sure no water was leaking through the roof or windows. Around midnight, when she was beginning to seriously worry, she heard horses outside and ran to the door. Russell, Miguel, and Carlos were all soaked again, but appeared unharmed. They came inside, and Gemma immediately set about getting them warm and fed. Miguel and Carlos were grateful but exhausted, and after eating, they headed back to their own house to rest. Russell stayed, standing by the fire and slowly warming up. All the cattle are safe, he reported. The creek did overflow, but not as badly as it could have. We'll need to rebuild that section of fence, but overall, we were lucky. I'm glad you're all right, Gemma said, relief flooding through her. I was worried. Were you? Russell asked, something in his tone making her look up at him sharply. Of course I was. You could have been hurt or worse. He stepped closer to her, his eyes searching her face. Gemma, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Her heart began to race. What is it? These past few months, being around you, getting to know you, I found myself feeling things I didn't expect to feel. I told myself I was just being protective, that I cared about you the way I care about Emma, as family, but that's not true, and I think you know it. He paused, seeming to gather his courage. Do you feel anything for me beyond friendship and gratitude? Gemma's breath caught. She had been trying so hard not to hope for this, not to let herself believe that Russell might return her growing feelings. I do, she whispered. I've tried not to, because you've already done so much for me, and I didn't want to complicate things or make you feel obligated, but I can't help it. When you're near me, everything feels right. When you're away, I worry and count the hours until you return. I think about you constantly, and I dream about you at night. I'm falling in love with you, Russell Young, and I don't know how to stop it even if I wanted to. The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment Gemma was terrified she had said too much, revealed too much. Then Russell closed the distance between them and gently cupped her face in his hands, his calloused thumbs brushing her cheeks. Don't stop it, he said, his voice rough with emotion. God, Gemma, I've been in love with you since the day I saw you standing on that platform, trying so hard to be brave. I knew then that I would do anything to keep you safe, to make you smile, to be worthy of you. I've spent these months trying to be patient, giving you time to heal and find your footing, but it's been torture being this close to you and not being able to tell you how I feel. You love me? She asked, hardly daring to believe it. I love you, he confirmed, and then he kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, giving her the chance to pull away if she wanted. But Gemma did not want to pull away. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with all the pent-up emotion and longing she had been holding inside. The kiss deepened, becoming more passionate, and Gemma felt as though she was on fire, despite the cold rain drumming against the windows outside. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Russell rested his forehead against hers. "I want to marry you, Gemma Vance. I want to build a life with you, raise a family, grow old together. But I know that might seem fast, and I don't want you to feel pressured. If you need time to think about it, to be sure I understand." "I don't need time," Gemma said, her voice shaking with joy. "Yes, Russell. Yes, I'll marry you. I've never been more sure of anything in my life." He kissed her again, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around, both of them laughing with pure happiness. When he set her down, his eyes were shining. "We'll do this right. I'll talk to the pastor. We'll have a proper wedding, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret saying yes." "I could never regret this," she said, touching his face tenderly. "You saved me, Russell. Not just from my uncle and that captain, but from a life without hope or love or purpose. You gave me everything." "You saved me too," he said quietly. "I didn't realize how lonely I was until you came into my life. You brought light and warmth to this house, to this ranch, to my heart. I was just existing before, going through the motions. Now I'm truly living." They stayed up most of the night, sitting by the fire and talking about their future, making plans and sharing dreams. Russell told her about his hopes for the ranch, about wanting to expand the herd and perhaps add horses to their stock. Gemma shared her desire to help the community, maybe starting a school for the children of ranch families who lived too far from town to attend regular classes. They talked about children of their own, about where they would live, about everything and nothing, simply reveling in the joy of being together and in love. When Emma returned 2 weeks later, she took one look at Russell and Gemma and immediately guessed what had happened. "Well, it's about time," she said, hugging them both. "I was beginning to think you two would dance around your feelings forever. I'm so happy for you both." The wedding was planned for early December, giving them time to prepare, but not so long that they had to wait forever. The entire community of Pacos and the surrounding ranches was invited, and Emma threw herself into the preparations with enthusiasm. Gemma found herself caught up in a whirlwind of planning, choosing fabric for her dress, which Emma helped her sew, deciding on food for the reception, sending invitations, and preparing the house for the influx of guests. Miguel and Carlos were overjoyed at the news, and Miguel confided to Gemma that he had been hoping for this outcome since the day Russell brought her home. "I see the way he look at you, señorita, from the very beginning, like you are the sun and he is a flower turning to the light. He is a good man, my Russell, and you make him very happy." The weeks leading up to the wedding were some of the happiest of Gemma's life. She and Russell stole moments together whenever they could, walking hand in hand around the ranch, stealing kisses in the barn, sitting together on the porch after supper. They were careful to maintain propriety, aware that Emma was watching and that they had a reputation to uphold, but the anticipation of their wedding night added an exciting tension to every interaction. Russell proved to be an attentive and thoughtful partner. He brought her wildflowers he found while out riding, helped her with heavy chores without being asked, and spent his evenings reading to her from books he ordered specially from Dallas. He was also unexpectedly romantic, writing her little notes that he would hide in places for her to find, and one evening he played guitar and sang to her, his voice rough but sincere, making her fall even more deeply in love with him. The wedding day arrived on a crisp December morning, clear and cold but beautiful. The ceremony was held at the small church in Pecos, with Pastor Henderson officiating. Gemma wore a dress of cream-colored silk that Emma had helped her sew, with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. She carried a bouquet of winter flowers, and her hair was styled in an elegant updo with small white flowers woven through it. Russell stood at the altar in his best suit, his eyes never leaving her as she walked down the aisle. There was such love and reverence in his expression that Gemma felt tears spring to her eyes. When she reached him, he took her hand and squeezed it gently, and she knew in that moment that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The ceremony was simple but beautiful, with Pastor Henderson speaking about love, commitment, and the sanctity of marriage. When it came time for the vows, Russell's voice was strong and clear as he promised to love, honor, and cherish Gemma for the rest of his life. Gemma's voice shook slightly with emotion as she made the same promises, but she meant every word with her entire heart. I now pronounce you husband and wife, Pastor Henderson said with a warm smile. Russell, you may kiss your bride. Russell cupped Gemma's face gently and kissed her with such tenderness that several people in the congregation sighed audibly. When they turned to face their guests as Mr. and Mrs. Young, the church erupted in applause and cheers. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the barn that had been decorated with evergreen branches and ribbons. Emma and several other women from the community had prepared a feast, and there was music and dancing well into the evening. Gemma danced with Russell, with Miguel, with Carlos, and with several other men from neighboring ranches, but she kept returning to her husband's arms, drawn to him like a magnet. As the evening wore on and guests began to leave, Emma pulled Gemma aside and hugged her tightly. I'm so happy to officially call you my sister now. Thank you for making Russell so happy and for being such a wonderful friend to me. I know our mother would have loved you. Thank you, Emma, for welcoming me into your family and your home. I love you both so much. When the last guest had finally departed and the house was quiet, Russell took Gemma's hand and led her upstairs to the room they would now share. He had moved his belongings in earlier that week, combining his space with hers to create a room that belonged to both of them. Emma had thoughtfully left a fire burning in the hearth, and the room was warm and inviting. Russell closed the door and turned to Gemma, suddenly looking nervous. I want you to know that we can take this as slowly as you need. I'm not going to rush you or pressure you. This is as much your decision as mine. Gemma smiled and stepped closer to him, reaching up to loosen his tie. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. I love you, Russell Young, and I want to be your wife in every way. What followed was tender and passionate, a joining of not just bodies but souls. Russell was gentle and patient, making sure Gemma felt safe and cherished every moment. When they finally lay together afterward, tangled in the sheets and each other, Gemma felt a sense of completeness she had never known was possible. Are you happy? Russell asked, tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. Happier than I ever thought I could be, she replied honestly. When I think about where I was just 6 months ago, standing on that platform and feeling like my life was over, and where I am now, married to the man I love and surrounded by family and friends, it feels like a dream. It's not a dream, Russell assured her. This is real and it's forever. I'm going to spend every day of the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. I could never regret choosing you. You're the best man I've ever known. They fell asleep in each other's arms, and Gemma slept more peacefully than she had in years. The first year of their marriage was an adjustment as they learned to navigate life as a couple, but it was filled with joy and love. Gemma threw herself into ranch life with renewed energy, taking on more responsibilities and working side by side with Emma to keep the household running smoothly. She also began teaching reading and writing to Carlos in the evenings, and word spread. Soon, several other children from neighboring ranches were coming to the Young ranch twice a week for lessons. Russell could not have been prouder of his wife. He watched her flourish, gaining confidence and finding her place not just in his life, but in the community. She had a natural gift for teaching, and the children adored her. He loved coming home to find her surrounded by young students, patiently explaining letters and numbers, her face animated with enthusiasm. Their relationship deepened as they learned each other's rhythms and needs. They had disagreements occasionally, as any couple does, but they always talked through them with respect and honesty. Russell learned that Gemma needed verbal reassurance sometimes, needing to hear that he loved her and was happy, and he made sure to tell her regularly. Gemma learned that Russell showed his love through actions more than words, and she learned to recognize the countless small ways he cared for her every day. As their first anniversary approached, Gemma began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited until she was certain before telling Russell, wanting to be sure before raising his hopes. When she finally confirmed her suspicions with the doctor in Pecos, she planned a special evening to tell him. That night, after supper, she asked Russell to take a walk with her. They strolled through the ranch as the sun set, hand in hand, and when they reached a spot overlooking the western pastures, Gemma stopped and turned to face him. "Russell, I have something to tell you. Something wonderful." He immediately looked concerned. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I'm more than all right. I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby." For a moment, Russell just stared at her, as though he could not quite process what she had said. Then his face broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen, and he let out a whoop of joy that startled the nearby cattle. He picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down carefully, looking worried. "Sorry, I shouldn't have done that. Are you feeling all right? Do you need to sit down? Should we go back to the house?" Gemma laughed at his sudden nervousness. "I'm fine, Russell. I'm pregnant, not made of glass, but yes, we're going to have a baby. In about 6 months, if the doctor's calculations are correct." "A baby," he said wonderingly, placing his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Our baby? Gemma, you've made me the happiest man alive. Are you hoping for a boy or a girl?" "I don't care," he said honestly. "As long as the baby is healthy and you're safe, that's all that matters. Though if it's a girl who looks like you, I'll be the luckiest father in Texas." Emma was thrilled when they told her the news, immediately beginning to plan and prepare. She started sewing baby clothes, and Russell began building a cradle in his workshop during the evenings. Miguel and Carlos congratulated them warmly, and Carlos told Gemma shyly that he hoped the baby would be a boy so he could teach him to ride and rope cattle. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Gemma experienced morning sickness for the first few months that left her exhausted and unable to eat much. Russell was attentive and worried, making sure she rested and stayed hydrated. As her belly grew, he became even more protective, not wanting her to lift anything heavy or work too hard. Gemma found it both endearing and occasionally frustrating, but she understood it came from a place of love. In early summer, on a warm June evening in 1880, Gemma went into labor. Emma sent Carlos to fetch the doctor from Pecos, while she and Russell helped Gemma through the contractions. Russell stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and whispering words of encouragement, even though Gemma could see he was terrified. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. There were moments when Russell feared he might lose Gemma, and he prayed harder than he had ever prayed in his life. But Gemma was strong, and with Emma's support and the doctor's expertise, she finally gave birth to a healthy baby boy as the sun reached its peak in the sky. "You have a son," the doctor announced, placing the squalling infant in Gemma's arms. "A big, healthy boy with a good set of lungs." Russell looked down at his wife and child, tears streaming down his face. "He's perfect. You're perfect. Thank you, Gemma. Thank you for this gift." They named him Robert after Russell's father, and from the moment he entered the world, he changed everything. Russell proved to be a devoted father, helping with nighttime feedings and diaper changes, and spending every spare moment holding or playing with his son. Gemma watched him rock Robert to sleep, singing the same songs he had once sung to her, and fell in love with her husband all over again. As Robert grew from infant to toddler, the young ranch continued to prosper. Russell expanded the herd and added horses to their stock, as he had always wanted, and the reputation of Young Ranch grew throughout the region. Gemma continued teaching, though she scaled back her classes while Robert was very young, and she found that she could manage both motherhood and her passion for education with Emma's help. When Robert was 2 years old, Gemma discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and she gave birth to a daughter they named Rachel. She had Russell's dark hair, but Gemma's green eyes, and she was the most content baby Gemma had ever seen. Robert was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything, and Russell joked that they were going to have to watch him carefully, or he would try to take Rachel out to see the cattle. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch thrived under Russell's careful management and Miguel's experienced guidance. Emma eventually met and married a kind rancher from a neighboring property, though she remained deeply involved in the lives of Russell, Gemma, and their children. The schoolroom at Young Ranch became a permanent fixture, with Gemma teaching children from all over the region 3 days a week. Years passed, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their family. A third child, another boy they named Richard, arrived when Rachel was 3. The house was filled with laughter and love, with the sounds of children playing and learning and growing. Russell and Gemma worked side by side, partners in every sense of the word, building a life that was richer and fuller than either of them had dared to dream. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Russell took Gemma back to Pecos, to the spot where he had first intervened to save her from being sold. They had not been there together since that terrible day, and Gemma felt a wave of emotion as they stood on the same dusty street where her life had changed forever. "Do you ever regret it?" Russell asked quietly. "Not marrying me, but the path that led you here? All the pain and loss you had to endure?" Gemma thought about it carefully before answering. "I regret losing my parents. I'll always grieve for them and wish things had been different. But I don't regret the path that brought me to you. Every hardship, every moment of fear and uncertainty led me to the greatest happiness I've ever known. You, our children, the life we've built together. It's worth everything I had to go through to get here. I look at you sometimes, at the woman you've become, and I'm amazed. You're so much stronger than I think you realize. You survived things that would have broken other people, and you came through it with your kindness and hope intact. I'm so proud to be your husband, and I'm grateful every day that you saw me on that platform and decided to help. You could have walked away. You could have decided it wasn't your problem, but you didn't. You stepped forward and changed both our lives forever." Russell pulled her close, kissing her softly. "I would make the same choice 1,000 times over. Loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life." As they rode back to the ranch, Gemma reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought them together. Her uncle had tried to sell her for passage east, believing he was ridding himself of a burden. Instead, a cowboy had paid more and kept her west, giving her a home, a family, and a love that would last a lifetime. What her uncle had meant for harm, Russell had transformed into the greatest blessing she had ever received. The children were growing quickly. Robert showed a natural aptitude for ranch work and could often be found following his father and Miguel around, learning everything he could about cattle and horses. Rachel had inherited her mother's love of teaching and would line up her dolls and younger brother to practice her lessons. Richard, still a toddler, was adventurous and fearless, keeping everyone on their toes. As the years continued to pass, Russell and Gemma watched their children grow into capable young people. They faced challenges together: droughts that tested the ranch's resources, harsh winters that were difficult to survive, economic downturns that required careful management, and the normal trials of raising a family. But through it all, their love remained constant, the foundation upon which everything else was built. Miguel eventually retired from active ranch work, though he remained a constant presence and advisor. Carlos took over his father's role as foreman, having grown into a skilled and trustworthy man. The ranch hands respected him, and Russell relied on his judgment implicitly. Carlos eventually married a young woman from Pecos, and they built a house on the ranch property near his father's, continuing the tradition of family working together. Emma and her husband had 3 children of their own, and the cousins grew up together, running wild across the ranch lands and creating memories that would last a lifetime. Family gatherings were loud and chaotic and filled with love, exactly the kind of family Gemma had always dreamed of having. When Robert turned 18, he took on more responsibility for running the ranch, working alongside his father and learning the business side of things. Rachel, at 16, had become an accomplished teacher in her own right, taking over many of Gemma's classes and talking about eventually starting a proper school in Pecos. Richard, at 15, had his father's quiet strength and his mother's compassionate heart and was still deciding what path he wanted to follow. Russell and Gemma, now in their early 40s, found themselves with slightly more time to themselves as the children became more independent. They treasured this time, often taking evening rides together across the ranch land they had built into something remarkable. Sometimes they would camp under the stars, just the two of them, talking and dreaming like they had in the early days of their courtship. "Do you remember what you said to me the day we met?" Russell asked one evening as they lay on blankets, looking up at the vast Texas sky. "When I asked what you expected from me?" "I asked you what you wanted from me," Gemma recalled. "I thought surely you must want something in return for helping me. And I told you I wanted nothing, that you were free to make your own choices. You gave me something more valuable than freedom, though. You gave me hope. You showed me that there were still good people in the world, that love and kindness weren't just stories. You gave me a reason to believe in happy endings." Russell rolled onto his side to look at her, propping himself up on one elbow. Even after all these years, her beauty still took his breath away. She had aged gracefully, with laugh lines around her eyes and a few strands of silver in her dark hair. But to him she was as beautiful as the day he had first seen her. "You gave me purpose," he said. "Before you, I was just going through the motions, doing what needed to be done, but not really living. You brought joy and meaning to everything. You made me want to be a better man, to build something lasting, to create a legacy worth leaving to our children." "We built it together," Gemma said, reaching up to touch his face. "Everything we have, everything we've accomplished, we did it as partners. I could never have done any of this without you. And I could never have done it without you," Russell replied, kissing her palm. "We're a team, now and forever." The years continued their march forward, bringing both joys and sorrows, as all lives do. Russell's health remained strong, and he continued working the ranch well into his 50s, though he gradually turned over more responsibilities to Robert and Carlos. Gemma's school grew, eventually expanding into a proper building in Pecos that served children from throughout the region. She was respected and beloved in the community, known for her dedication to education and her kind heart. Robert married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property, and they gave Russell and Gemma their first grandchildren. Rachel married a schoolteacher from Dallas who moved to Pecos to be with her, and together they took over the school, allowing Gemma to finally step back and enjoy her grandchildren. Richard surprised everyone by showing an interest in medicine, and with his parents' support, he went east to study to become a doctor, planning to return to serve the community. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the entire extended family gathered at Young Ranch for a celebration. Children and grandchildren, Emma and her family, Miguel and Carlos and their families, friends from throughout the region, all came together to honor the couple whose love story had become something of a legend in Pecos. As Russell and Gemma stood together greeting their guests, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built together, Gemma felt overwhelmed with gratitude. 25 years ago, she had been a terrified girl with no family and no future, being sold like property to the highest bidder. Now she was a respected teacher, a beloved mother and grandmother, a cherished wife, and a vital part of a community she had helped to build. "What are you thinking about?" Russell asked, noticing the tears in her eyes. "I'm thinking about how blessed I am, how different my life could have been if you hadn't been there that day. I'm thinking about all the moments that led us here, all the struggles and triumphs, and how I wouldn't change a single thing because it all brought us to this moment." Russell pulled her close, not caring that people were watching. "Neither would I. Every day with you has been a gift, Gemma. Every single day." The party continued late into the evening, with music and dancing and storytelling. The grandchildren begged for the story of how their grandparents met, and Russell and Gemma told it together, each adding details the other forgot, laughing at the memories and marveling at how far they had come. As the guests finally began to leave and the house grew quiet, Russell and Gemma sat together on the porch swing he had built years ago, watching the stars come out one by one. The ranch was peaceful. The cattle settled for the night, the horses quiet in their corrals. Inside the house, their children were helping clean up, their laughter drifting through the open windows. "We did all right, didn't we?" Russell said softly. "We did better than all right," Gemma replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "We built something beautiful, a family, a home, a legacy of love that will continue through our children and grandchildren. We took something that started in pain and fear and transformed it into something wonderful." "Do you ever think about your uncle, wonder what became of him?" Gemma considered the question. She had not thought about Bernard in years, had let go of any bitterness or anger long ago. "Sometimes. I hope he found whatever he was looking for in New Orleans, though I doubt he did. People like him, who are only out for themselves, rarely find true happiness. But I've forgiven him. Without his selfishness and cruelty, I might never have ended up here. In a strange way, his worst actions led to my greatest blessings." "That's a very generous way to look at it. I learned from the best," Gemma said, squeezing his hand. "You taught me that holding on to anger only hurts yourself, that forgiveness is freedom, and that the best revenge is living well and being happy." "And I am happy, Russell. So incredibly happy." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of silence that only comes from years of companionship and deep understanding. Finally, Russell spoke again. "I love you, Gemma Young. I loved you the moment I saw you. I love you now, and I'll love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Russell Young. You are my hero, my partner, my best friend, and the love of my life. Thank you for choosing me, for saving me, for loving me." He kissed her then, a kiss that held 25 years of love and passion and partnership, and Gemma felt the same flutter in her heart that she had felt the very first time he kissed her. Some things never changed, and her love for this man was one of them. The years that followed were gentler, quieter. Russell and Gemma stepped fully back from the day-to-day running of the ranch. Though they remained involved and available for advice, they spent their time with grandchildren who adored them and loved hearing stories about the old days. They traveled a bit, finally taking the trip to San Antonio that Gemma had always wanted, and they spent long hours simply being together, reading and talking and enjoying the peace they had earned. When Richard returned from medical school, qualified as a doctor, he set up a practice in Pecos and married a lovely young woman he had met during his studies. The entire family was there for the wedding. 3 generations of Youngs gathered together to celebrate. Russell and Gemma watched their youngest child start his own family with pride and joy, knowing their legacy was secure. As they entered their 60s, Russell's health began to decline slightly, though nothing serious. He moved more slowly, tired more easily, but his mind remained sharp, and his love for Gemma never wavered. She cared for him with the same devotion he had always shown her, and they faced this new stage of life together with grace and acceptance. On a warm spring evening in 1905, as they sat together watching yet another spectacular sunset, Russell turned to Gemma with a smile. "Do you remember I promised you on our wedding day that I would spend every day of the rest of my life making sure you never regretted choosing me?" "I remember," Gemma said, her eyes misty. "And you've kept that promise." "I have never regretted it, not for a single moment." "Good," he said, satisfied. "Because you, Gemma Young, are the best thing that ever happened to me. Saving you that day was the easiest decision I ever made, and loving you has been the greatest joy of my life." "The feeling is entirely mutual," Gemma assured him. "You saved me, Russell, in every way a person can be saved. You gave me a home when I had none, a family when I was alone, and a love I never dreamed possible. You've been my constant, my rock, My everything. They kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. Around them, the ranch hummed with life, their children and grandchildren, the cattle and horses, the land they had loved and cared for throughout their lives. It was a legacy of love, built on the foundation of one man's decision to stand up for what was right and one woman's courage to believe in second chances. Their story, which had begun with an act of cruelty and been transformed by an act of kindness, had bloomed into something beautiful and lasting. The uncle who had tried to sell her for passage on a ship east was long forgotten, his name spoken rarely, if at all. But the cowboy who had paid more and kept her west, who had loved her fiercely and faithfully for nearly 3 decades, would be remembered and celebrated by generations of youngs to come. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Russell and Gemma remained on the porch, hand in hand, watching the night settle over their beloved ranch. They had faced hardships and triumphs, sorrows and joys, challenges and victories, and through it all, their love had remained constant. They had built a life together that was rich in every way that mattered, in family, in friendship, in community, in purpose, and most of all, in love. No regrets? Russell asked one more time. Not a single one, Gemma replied firmly. Only gratitude for every moment we've shared. And there on the porch of the ranch they had built together, surrounded by the evidence of their love and labor, they held each other close and counted their blessings. The girl who had been sold for passage east had instead found her home in the west, in the arms of the cowboy, who had seen her worth and been willing to pay everything to keep her safe. Together, they had created a love story for the ages, one that would inspire their descendants for generations to come, a testament to the transformative power of love, courage, and the simple decision to do the right thing, no matter the cost.